and welcome to Experts Corner. This is Maheen Jafri. Tonight we're going to be talking about Pakistan's war on terrorism. Of course, the latest developments where all the Fitna ul Khawarij elements who were involved in the horrific suicidal blast in Islamabad and Wana have been apprehended. Not just that, they've also confessed that they've had clear instructions from Afghanistan during the investigation. And now that Pakistan has a clear evidence, Pakistan would be sharing this evidence with not only the mediators, Turkey and Qatar, but also it is going to be sharing with the Afghan Taliban. And Pakistan would, of course, be weighing its options. Also, we know Australia government has proposed amendment in the sanction regulations. This would enable them to hold Taliban accountable or all those entities who are involved in oppressing women, girls or other minorities. We're going to be taking a look at this in detail. And in our second segment, of course, we're going to be discussing the critical Bihar elections in which BJP-led alliance has a sweeping victory. This is the exit polls that are suggesting. And of course, what would it mean for BJP and for the greatest interest of India, because it pretends that it's a democratic state, but unfortunately it is involved in all kinds of terrorism across the region. Now, for further analysis, we have been joined by Jawad Tehami in our studio, Barrister Fatima Shaheen online with us, and also Lt.Gen. retired Ghulam Mustafa, defense analyst. Thank you, all of you, for joining in. General Saab, starting with you. Now we know that Pakistan has hard evidence. We know that the investigations reveal that Afghanistan was clearly involved. How do you think Pakistan is going to take the next move, because it's clearly weighing its options?
Well, let me begin by saying that the last time around when Pakistan went after these terrorists in Afghanistan, Pakistan had declared that anything coming from Afghanistan will be responded to very decisively and very strongly. And no less a person than our defense minister had said so. So therefore, there is very little doubt, very little room for doubt that what kind of response Pakistan must be weighing as its option one. Number two, with regard to these proofs, Pakistan has not only these, but ample proofs of the involvement of the Kabul regime in the terrorism that is happening across length and breadth of the country. Therefore, presenting this to whom, for what purposes? If I heard you correctly, I think Australian government is the first one which has picked up this threat, and they feel that some kind of sanctions are in order. I believe the world at large must see this menace as a whole, and not only for this region, but spreading on the other areas as well. And this kind of a mindset, if allowed to prevail and allowed to prosper in Afghanistan, has very, very dangerous consequences for the region and the long term for the world at large. So therefore, if this is what Pakistan is planning in the diplomatic front, that we are going to involve other major countries, at least the countries around Afghanistan, and those who matter in getting these Taliban under some kind of a sanction, that would be another, I think, a very positive step that Pakistan were to do. Having said that, can we do that kind of a thing? Will the world come around to our viewpoint? I know that Iran is now sharing Pakistan's standpoint. China has no doubt about it. And Russia left no doubt about this when it held a conference a few weeks ago and declared and told the Taliban that they should not allow their land to be used against any country, not only Pakistan. So having all the others, those who matter, and why I'm saying that is because I have maintained all along, and I haven't been given any reason to change my viewpoint. Number one, Americans. Number two, Israelis. Number three, Indians. This nexus, this axis of evil is very strongly present in Kabul. And their footprints you can see on the all kind of terrorist activities that are going on in Pakistan. And their purpose is understandable. You can't understand why Taliban regime would be doing it, because they don't gain anything out of it other than the fact, the money that they're coming from all these countries that I've mentioned. Otherwise, these are the countries which have an interest in this region. They are the countries who do not like, number one, Pakistan to prosper. They don't want Pakistan to become a strong bulwark against all kind of issues which are happening here. They don't want Pakistan-China's partnership to prosper beyond a certain point. They don't want Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Central Asian republics to be linked, rail and road and other linkages, so that not only that this area is open to the rest of the world, but also because as we see things settling down in the larger context, in the power corridors of the world, now are settling in favor of East. And what is more, which is worrying the Americans and American-led allies, that the financial capital is slowly but very surely shifting from New York, is coming to Shanghai. That is what I think is worrying them the most. And therefore, when I say that I have no reason to change my mind about my views about these three colliding and sitting in Afghanistan, and they're the ones who come from there, they can do whatever I'm talking about. They can disrupt the development of Pakistan relationship. They can disrupt the expansion of CPAC. They can disrupt the exploration and the exploitation of Caspian Sea resources, which can help world for a very long time. And their export can be through Iran and through Pakistan. So that's where I think we need to concentrate. And if Pakistan were to adopt a strategy, of course, kinetic energy is available to Pakistan, and it's a very effective one too. Diplomatic front, take the case to the world and ask the world to get around to Pakistan's viewpoint and force Taliban into submission, or at least to the extent that their territory is not going to be used against Pakistan or any other country for that matter. And number three.
Yes. Go ahead, please.
And number three, the region in which Afghanistan is located is landlocked. There are 6 countries around it. I have counted few. Tajikistan is part of that. If you can include these countries into a tighter ring around Afghanistan, they can tighten Afghanistan's belt like nobody else can. And therefore, if these countries come on board and Pakistan is about to engage them in a regional approach, that would actually be in Pakistan's favor in the long run, also helping CPAC, also helping this region as a whole, and also helping the power structure to settle towards the east, which is destined to, if not now, maybe another decade or so.
Right. General Saab, we were talking about the options with Pakistan, and of course you told in detail. Now let's look at the Afghanistan side, the announcements coming from that side rather than making peace or at least trying to mend the relationship. They are giving announcements like they're asking their traders to halt any kind of trade with Pakistan. What kind of mindset are you looking at? What is the vision that you're looking at? Because this is further harming their own country and their own people.
Let's first distinguish between the Taliban leadership and the people of Afghanistan. The people of Afghanistan are as much victims of the regime's this kind of attitude like Pakistan is. Having said that, I must also add here that these Taliban leadership, if you look at the kind of wealth that they have and look at where their families are and look at where their properties are, you will realize that they have very little to gain from peaceful region as such, because that is where their money comes from. If there was to be peace between Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is a must for both the countries, and the people of Afghanistan need it as much as we do, because whatever supplies they get, mostly they come and go via Pakistan. And their trade is actually mostly through via Pakistan. And the sea routes, the only sea route available to them, other than Chabahar, is Pakistan, and traditionally so. So therefore, actually, they couldn't care less. And the kind of trade that they're talking about, Pakistan can do without it. But they can't do without what Pakistan can offer them, what Pakistan has offered them, regardless of whatever else was happening in Afghanistan. Pakistan never ever stopped its food supplies to the people, because Pakistan understands that we need to help those people. At least now it is more important that we need to help these people get out of the clutches of these monsters sitting as the regime.
General Saab, also, we know that the weapons that have been recovered from these sites, blast sites, are all the American-made weapons. And we also know that UN Ambassador Munir Akram, he expressed serious concerns on behalf of Pakistan when it comes to Taliban free access to the stockpiles of these weapons, which are all very sophisticated and modern. What do you have to see? Because there's a lot of dynamics involved when Pakistan-Afghanistan equation comes. Pakistan has to control a lot of sides.
This is what I said, that the Americans, when the American troops left the region, they just didn't melt away. The American army, the army that had been trained by NATO, and the weapons they were left behind deliberately. They could have taken these weapons away. They didn't. And they left them, and some of the stockpiles are reportedly available in Bagram Air Base as well, so that Taliban, if they come short of it, they can have a ready stock available. So there's a whole lot of things which have happened. Unfortunately, people in Pakistan, we were not very aware of what was happening there. We all thought that the Taliban regime, when it takes over Kabul, they will at least become peaceful. And we all thought at that time, and I've been saying since then, that the Afghan army that was trained by NATO was not melted. The intelligence agencies which are trained by NATO and India and all, they have not melted. And those people who are helping them, they have not gone away. Some of them, yes, they were taken away specifically by Americans and the other NATO countries and India, but the footprints are there. And let's forget when we are talking about it, that NATO, under the leadership of America, allowed India to establish 6 consulates just around Pakistan, in the areas which are God-forsaken. If you just look at them, there was nothing there for India to have a consulate for, other than creating and running terror infrastructure in Pakistan. So the weapons are available, the people have been trained. That is what is worrying, and that is what should worry the world more, and that must worry the countries around the region. Now Pakistan is the target, because Pakistan happens to be the country which is now the pivot around which CPAC, etc., revolves. If Pakistan were to be, God forbid, damaged in a way that Pakistan either pulls away from the CPAC or is forced to slow down this, then this whole project of Belt Road Initiative and the connectivity, which was the key of CPAC, that will fall apart.
General Saab, what can Pakistan expect from the mediators who are, obviously they had to visit Pakistan, and when they look at Pakistan, the exact case study, and they look at the latest terror events, how do you look at that? How do we expect these mediators to jump in, and what kind of pressure do we need? Because we have done that already, 3 rounds of talks, and we have given them swift reply militarily as well. What kind of response are we expecting from these mediating partners?
I mean, very frankly, when Pakistan jumped on the occasion, the offer of talks, I didn't appreciate that, because Pakistan didn't have to hurry into it. Pakistan should have held back. That is the time when Pakistan had built up a certain pressure on Taliban, and they were building under the pressure. A little more push would have been more useful, and alongside, before Pakistan went to talks, Pakistan should have gotten certain conditions already accepted. Now, with all the best intentions that Qatar has and Turkey have, they are very great friends, and they have tried their very best. But their best is not good enough to compel Taliban to submission into only one condition, that their territory must not be used. So what you're talking about is that these two countries, with the best of intentions, they do not have that kind of sway, of that kind of a hold over Taliban, which maybe Russia, China, Iran, Pakistan, Tajikistan combined, along with our friends Turkey, Saudi Arabia, which they can do. That is why I'm insisting time and again that Pakistan diplomatically must engage these countries and approach this issue as an issue which affects the region as a whole. Otherwise, Turkey and Qatar, they have some kind of hold, but that is not sufficient, not good enough, not strong enough, which can compel Taliban to accept a very simple, straight request: stop getting your territory as a launching pad against Pakistan.
Right. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Retired Ghulam Mustafa, Defense Analyst, for joining us in our show and giving your precious views on how do you think the situation might be unfolding. Now, coming to you, Barrister Fatima Shaheen, we know that Pakistan reserves the right to retaliate, and we know that there are provisions in United Nations Charter. What other provisions are there in the international law when it comes to Pakistan retaliating?
I think the law is very clear here, and we've spoken about this before as well. Maheen, I think whenever any country's soil is being used to actually harm the territorial integrity or sovereignty of any other country, that country reserves that right to act in self defense. Now, when we talk about self defense, which Pakistan should and must use, it involves that three requirements must be met. Number one, the response should ideally be immediate, it should be necessary, and thirdly, that it should be proportionate as well. When we do talk about this, also what is very important to talk about in the international law context is the fact that Pakistan, I think, has very intelligently also brought this, to the attention of United Nations Security Council, raising its very concerns regarding the fact that there are arms and ammunitions there, and of course, that in itself also poses a threat to them being smuggled and in turn posing a threat to regional security. What Pakistan can perhaps additionally do in this regard is also to take this forward with reference to raising its concerns in the periodic reports that it does submit. And in that regard, put forward what kind of issues it is facing, since how long it has facing, also put forward all the evidence, that clear-cut black and white evidence that we have seen to acquire in this regard. But in addition to that, I think what is very important to also note here is that whereas, of course, Pakistan must and should approach all these international forums, it must not, lose out on that angle of simultaneously, also using its soft power and diplomatically engaging, perhaps with more countries, who are OIC members as well, so that entire pressure and notion of that is something that comes with a force on Afghanistan. So, that would be my, advice generally to the way Pakistan should present its case to the international world.
Absolutely, Barrister Fatima Shaheen. Jawad Tehami, coming to you, how would you, present your argument when it comes to the unfolding situation between Pakistan and Afghanistan now?
Well, this resurgence of terrorism is completely unacceptable, Maheen. Now, there is a clear red line. The Foreign Office has once again reiterated that there are going to be no talks, no dialogue when it comes to the banned TTP and BLA, the Fitna al-Khawarij as well as the Fitna al-Hindustan. So there is a clear-cut red line. There is not going to be any sort of a dialogue. The dialogue could be given a chance to only the TTA, the Afghan Taliban, but 3 continuous rounds of talks have failed because of their behavior, their approach. Now, there are multiple international reports, including the United Nations Sanctions Monitoring Committee report, which alludes to the fact there has been connivance as far as the Afghan Taliban and banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is concerned. So that is pretty much established, that they've been given that particular support, also that freedom to navigate through the territory of Afghanistan in order to build their safe havens and also perpetrate these heinous crimes inside Pakistan using Afghanistan's soil. Now here, Pakistan has to be at the position of strength. Now, as Barrister Fatma also alluded to the fact, Pakistan reserves the right to self-defend against the cross-border terrorism when it comes to Pakistan exercising that particular right. That is pretty much legitimate as per the United Nations Charter and other international law instruments as well. So rest assured, if Pakistan resorts to any sort of kinetic action in Afghanistan's territory, that would be covered by the provisions of international law. And as per my understanding, there is not going to be any sort of an issue as far as the international community, the major powers, are concerned. Secondly, when we talk about this whole scenario, it was because of that war on terror that was waged against the terrorist outfits in Afghanistan. Now, it happens to be the first and foremost responsibility of the United States of America that it waged a war for 2 decades there. Now, it has to get into engagement with the Afghan Taliban. We saw that the Doha Peace Accord was struck during the President Trump's first administration. Now it is his second administration. It is incumbent upon President Trump's administration to have that engagement with the Afghan Taliban and impress upon them that they've got the international obligations to meet and fulfill. Otherwise, there would be repercussions. And also, when it comes to the leftover weapons, as you already mentioned, that was also talked about by Lt.Gen. Ghulam Mustafa as well. Now, it happens to be the responsibility of the United States of America in order to ensure that the retrieval of such leftover weapons happens. Now, there is another front. When we talk about the regional front, when it comes to the responsibility of the regional countries, we have seen in the recent past that China has played a pivotal role. Because of that particular pivotal role, we saw the tripartite talks happening between Pakistan, China, and the Afghan Taliban as well. Pakistan had been giving a lot when it comes to understanding the miseries and the kind of suffering of the Afghan people. Pakistan upgraded the diplomatic relations with the Afghan Taliban. So we expect similar sort of reciprocation happening from the Afghan Taliban when it comes to Pakistan's primary concerns of dealing with the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, which are using the Afghan soil.
Absolutely, Jawad. We totally agree with what you've said. It was about the situation unfolding between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And of course, they have crossed the red lines and Pakistan has got all the right to retaliate. And now we're moving towards the second segment, which is about the Bihar election, a critical state where the BJP-led alliance is sweeping. The exit polls suggest that it is sweeping with clear victory. And though we know that Bihar is the poorest state, but what could be the reasons of BJP's win in this state? We have been joined by Mr. Dr. Jamil Khan, rather former ambassador on Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure being with you.
Now, Ambassador Jamil Khan, could you please shed some light on this fact? What and how could it affect the BJP in the national elections after the sweeping win in the critical Bihar state?
Well, we have to really examine the way they had done the pre-election manipulation, what we call pre-election or pre-poll rigging, during poll rigging and post-poll rigging. So that is one part of it. And all these tools were applied, whether it was a voter list or there was something else. So pre-poll rigging, they revised the voter list towards the 11th hour and given a special incentive to the people around. Electoral roll was published at the last moments after revising, after changing the constituencies and the polling stations. And then candidate nominations were also arranged in such a way that those who were from the opposition had found it difficult really to file their nomination. And then was the media certification for the BJP people or their allies. They had very relaxed mechanism, whereas for the opposition, they had much more tougher mechanism. And all these tools they applied. But at the same time, we have to really also bear in mind that the policy, the RSS propelled BJP government, what actually they do. The influence of RSS and the correlation between RSS and BJP is to be understood in order to understand how they were able to sweep the election, because that's what the BJP had planned. And that they have been working a lot on two provinces in particular, otherwise in the entire country, the alignment of ideology. The RSS, basically, as we know, right from 1925, they have been fomenting the nationalist, Hindu nationalist feelings in the society. And in these two provinces, particularly Bihar and the upper UP, Upper Pradesh, in both these places, they shaped up Hindutva agenda, basically. And then cadre-based politics they have resorted to. RSS, they have the network of trained cadre of all type. the cadre which would be on social media, the cadre which would be the fighters, the cadre which would be the people who would be let on the minorities to unleash their atrocities. So those cadres are specially prepared and they are handed over to during the electoral time to the BJP, and that's what had happened in 2014 and 19 both. So that is the strategy basically. And leadership overlap. What could be the better example of leadership overlap of RSS and BJP? No one less than the current Prime Minister Modi. He has been right from his childhood the RSS worker and RSS appointment holder, and then later on he switched over to BJP. So this interchangeable. They are first trained as the radicals of the RSS, and then they are deployed in their political wing of that. So that is, in fact, these are those strategies which is followed by RSS come BJP, and that's how they start, and that's what had happened in Bihar election also. And Bihar election, otherwise there was a very tough competition. In fact, the opposition had really worked very hard on that, and there has been statements by the opposition leader as to what was the pre-poll and during the poll, and what rigging has taken place, what illegal tools have been
Absolutely, Dr.
used for
Jamil.
it.
We know that the
Um,
opposition
uh,
was resisting on the fact that the Election Commission in India took out voters' name. Most of them were Muslims. But the fact that the female voter turnout was historic this time, what could be the incentive and how do we justify the win if we look at it?
You see, well, we have to understand that the male-dominated society, and once they have really raised the feeling of that Hindutva feeling, then the male members they made sure that they drive their female members out, and they asked what they wanted to do them to do, and that's how they got the voters. One more point, in fact, to understand the overall strategy of how they have won the election in Bihar or elsewhere, how do they won it basically. The RSS, it collaborate with multiple activities, and there are various, and one of the glaring example of that is Ram Mandir construction in Adoya. And Citizens Amendment Act, they all were basically conceived, and then the mindset was leveled. The very feeling of Hindutva was sparked throughout the ranks and files of the society, and that's how then once it comes to driving female candidates out of their homes and making sure that they vote what they are asked to vote. So these are basically mixed kind of strategies where they first enhance the feelings of those people, and then they have those cadres which I just mentioned a little while ago, that those cadres are then let loose on these people, and then ensure that they.
Ambassador Jamil, you talked about feelings and sentiments, and we know that the timing was very significant when the blast, Delhi blast happened. It was a phase 2 of Bihar. Do you think that he used these sentiments of fear and, doubts against Pakistan and such things, to get the voter bank in Bihar? This could be one of the reasons.
Well, RSS influenced government of BJP. They have been always doing that. And if we review the campaign, what was done during 1914 election, it was all a rhetoric against Pakistan and against the minorities and the Hindutva ideology. So, and again, the next election also was won on the same basis. So, every election, in fact, in our election, we hardly hear anything about India. But in India, the election is completely, it pivots around huge propaganda against Pakistan.
Tehami, how would you think that BJP has really used sentiments when it comes to stoking national sentiments, especially using Pakistan against, their entire agenda to
Well, okay,
garner
before,
votes?
before addressing that particular question, Maheen, if you allow me, let me just bring in very important aspect of what exactly was said by Prime Minister Modi. As far as the major issue concerning this particular, one of the most populous states in India was the unemployment. Now, what he came up with was something really funny. I personally find it very ridiculous because he said that if you want employment, start producing Insta Reels. Can you imagine the Prime
Really?
Minister of the so-called largest democracy in the world
Wow.
is giving a solution to unemployment to the younger generation by asking them that they should start producing Insta Reels. Now, coming to this particular point, if we look at what the opinion polls just before the start of this particular election were actually alluding to, there was a slightest margin of this particular National Democratic Alliance of Bharatiya Janata Party against the opposition, which was around 1.6%. Now, the kind of results that we are looking at today is that's in a stark contrast to what the opinion polls were saying. That allude to primarily two factors. The first is that the so-called intensive revision of the electoral rolls, and there was quite a resentment regarding that among the general populace over there in Bihar as well. Secondly, when we talk about, you already mentioned there was a record or unprecedented turnout when it came to women voting over there. So keeping that particular, the demographic or the that strata, how does it actually sway the very dynamics or the mechanics of the election over there in Bihar? Because of the poverty and unemployment, the male strata of that particular state moves to other states of India. Hence, there's a considerable chunk of females left behind who actually form a considerable chunk of the electorate over there. Now, there was a sinister campaign, although it was tried to be legitimized through a welfare scheme of the chief minister of that particular state, but that also has been talked about by a section of Indian media that it was a bribery to the female electorate of that particular state. If you allow me, let me bring in those numbers. $880 million have been distributed among 7.5 million female voters. So that happens to be a direct bribery in order to sway the very understanding of the female electorate as far as this particular state is concerned. Here comes into question that very credibility or the efficiency of the Election Commission of India. Where Election Commission of India was when all these things were happening. Now, they've justified this particular revision, the intensive revision of the electoral rolls. But when it comes to bribery...
Jawad, we'll come back to you. We have Dr. Jamil Khan, former ambassador, who has joined us back. Dr. Jamil Khan, your comments on what we were talking about, it was about the significant timing of the Delhi bomb blast and using the nationalistic sentiment to garner votes.
Oh, that's right. In fact, it's not the first time. Every time there is some incident, the Modi government, Modi administration, with its alignment with RSS. In fact, RSS fueled the government of BJP. They always try to encash that, and they always give vent to the Hindutva mindset, and that they always try and just further polarize the society, and that benefits them, and that's how they divert. Besides all other things, what we are discussing, the bribery and how the female voters are influenced, or the unemployed voters, or the poor people, how they are influenced to vote. Otherwise, such a huge margin, while the pre-poll surveys were altogether different.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. We all agree to the point that you raised. Thank you so much, Dr. Jamil Khan, former ambassador, for joining us. Now, Barrister Fatima Shaheen, we were talking about the ECP, pre-poll rigging, post-poll rigging, and of course the Election Commission of India. It also seems to be a tool working for BJP. What would you comment from a legal point of view?
I think from the legal point of view, of course, in the event that this is an allegation which is proven, it could be something which could then perhaps be something which would be subjected to courts. But I think leaving that aside, what is more important to talk about is the unfortunate trend that we see in India, which is in dire contrast with what we see and how we see the global politics evolving. For example, we've recently seen New York elect its first young, very socially motivated, a person with a very different kind of a view of the world, wanting to give back to the society, looking above people, regardless of their race, class, or religion, bringing all these progressive politics in. But in dire contrast to that, it appears that countries like India, especially under the Hindutva ideology, have perhaps not learned anything. And what is more, I would say, disheartening for me to see is that the Gen Z and the women there, who did comprise a very large proportion of the voter base there, unfortunately do fall victim to these very lowly tactics. And I do feel that was something that is very important to clarify at this end is also the fact, Maheen, that when we do talk about this very ideology, this is something which is just not then very peculiar or focused upon Modi actually propagating for the same. This is also something that the opposition party is guilty of doing. We have seen the opposition parties not actively champion for minority rights or Muslim rights just because they feel that this in itself would actually challenge the Hindutva ideology, and they wouldn't want to be actually seen as that, because that would inevitably lead to a loss of their electoral vote. So I think the lessons perhaps that we might need to learn from this entire thing is that it's high time that countries like India, especially in the wake of the recent election results that we have seen, they perhaps need to learn some very important lessons from cities like New York, where there's generally a very good precedent of bold, of inclusive, of socially motivated, of very equal politics, so to speak. So yes, that would be my comment.
Right, and Jawad Tehami, how would you explain to me the fact that if the BJP is gaining power at the center because of these elections, and yet we have to see the next year the elections in West Bengal, of course, and Tamil Nadu, where BJP is not in power. But if it comes to power in center, how do you see the ultra-nationalistic, hyper hatred-based policies, and how could it further deteriorate the state of India?
Okay, when there are other states that need to be talked about, when we talk about the legislative assembly elections of state of Karnataka, we saw a huge setback. And also when we talk about Bharatiya Janata Party, the Hindutva mindset, which is driven, of course, by the RSS. Now, that is very much embedded into the very fabric of society. That has actually rattled the very fabric of society. As already mentioned by Barrister Fatima also, the kind of contrast that we are seeing at this particular point in time as the politics is happening in the United States of America, those societies which are more inclusive. When we talk about this particular society of India that happens to be the largest, the so-called largest democracy in the world, and naturally it should be more inclusive. Rather, it has been meting out such a brutal discrimination to minorities when it comes to Muslims, Christians, even the Hindus themselves, the Dalits. We have seen the kind of discrimination happening to Sikhs as well. That's why when we talk about those annual reports of the United States International Commission for Religious Freedom, for a number of consecutive years, is that it has come up with reports that allude to the fact that because of this Hindutva ideology, there is less religious freedom within India. When it comes to this Hindutva ideology, that card very much sells within that society because that very fabric is now embedded with that particular very Hindutva ideology, which is a racist ideology. It is a militant Hindu supremacist ideology. That's why the United States International Commission for Religious Freedom asks the US State Department to enter India's name into the list of countries of particular concern. But it is now the responsibility of such departments or such administrations or those governments which actually represent the inclusive societies, for example, the United States of America, in order to bring such countries into such lists, that India should be designated as a country of a particular concern when it comes to religious freedom.
Absolutely.
And the kind of
Jawad, there's another question coming to my mind when you were talking about discrimination. there were opposition voices, and Chidambaram also said that there are homegrown terrorists as well when we talk about India, because they were entirely framing it on Muslims. We know that they're connecting the link to Faridabad and then the intelligence from Turkey. What do you have to say when we talk about discrimination? I'll also take your comment, Barrister Fatima Shaheen, but firstly, we'll ask Jawad.
Well, there's a long list of when it comes to Maheen. This is a very important, pertinent question that needs to be addressed. There is a lot that can be talked about it. There's a long list of false flag operations that India has been using, most particularly when it comes to pinpointing fingers without any concrete or a solid evidence against Pakistan, right? Rather than introspecting or looking inwards, we have seen a long list of the kind of brutal acts happening when it comes to those groups or those communities which have been on the basis of that Hindutva ideology. There have been mob lynching, a number of instances of mob lynching as well over there. We've also seen, as you already talked about, the homegrown terrorists. No, now that particular ideology is not only a threat to the very fabric of India itself, it is also posing a threat to the other countries, most particularly when we talk about Pakistan. The kind of confession we saw by Kulbhushan Yadav, of course, there is a long list of false flag operations. India tries to carry out any operation within its territory and then try to pinpoint fingers towards Pakistan without any concrete evidence. Rather, it has been exporting actively terrorism to the other states, not only in Pakistan. The classical case of Kulbhushan Yadav, we've also seen that assassination of a Sikh leader on the Canadian soil as well, and that assassination attempt on the US soil as well. So India itself is involved in a number of transnational terrorist activities, and rather than addressing its own issue at home, rather than going for the introspection of its own policies. When the world is working on a very different dimension, India is resorting to such type of tactics which are very lowly, and they need to be actually addressed from within. There are certain saner voices from within India, but they've been snubbed completely. There is no freedom of expression, there is no freedom of speech over there as well. Even the journalists, even
they've been called anti-nationalists.
Anti-nationalists, and there is a classical case of BBC as well, when it made a documentary regarding as to what kind of a role of Prime Minister Narendra Modi when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. He had played in that very massacre of Muslims on such a massive scale. When that documentary came out, what the Modi government did was they resorted to going into the offices of BBC, both in Mumbai and Delhi, and they tried to bring in all those employees and all people working over there. Firstly, they intimidated them, also tried to make cases against them regarding when it comes to the filing of the tax returns. So they resort to such type of lowly tactics, and this continues with impunity. I think the international community needs to come into the play at this particular point in time in order to impress upon the Indian authorities that they are also accountable on certain fronts.
Barrister Fatma, your quick comment.
I think he has very rightly so highlighted a lot of things. The only thing that I would want to, reiterate is the fact that, time and again, we have seen all these incidents occurring. We've also seen, recently 2,500 Muslims being actually prosecuted for expressing their love for the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. And other than that, I think when it comes to their own legal system, when it comes to their own constitution, a country which is founded on secularism, on democracy, on the very fundamentals of rule of law, I think this entire Hindutva ideology is something which runs very much counter to that. And then again, I feel this is something which is just not confined to the government of the day, or for that matter, even the opposition. It also stretches its contours to the courts, to the media, to practically each and every person. And I think the win of this ideology, that too, as we have seen, I think kind of reinforces that. Recently, I think maybe perhaps a contributing factor to the same could also have been Pakistan's emerging as a very successful economic, foreign, diplomatically strengthened country. And of course, after the May clashes, we saw that, the way India actually lost from us. That is
We
also something which would.
actually agree to all the points that you have raised. Thank you so much, Barrister Fatima Shaheen, and also Jawad Tehami, for this important and pertinent segment where we are talking about the critical elections in Bihar state, where BJP-led alliance is clearly having a victory. And we discussed in detail on what could it mean for the BJP in the center, what could it mean for the ultra-nationalistic, hatred-based policies when it comes to India, because India was founded at one point on the basis of democracy, but now, unfortunately, the entire fabric of the society is being embedded in the Hindutva ideology that is dragging India towards extremism and radicalization. This was all for tonight's show. Stay tuned to Pakistan TV. It's Maheen Jafri signing off.